Figured it out. They just didn't. That's all I need. That's fair.
Yes, our phone didn't work.
Chief, I'm gonna remember that. I'm trying to get into.
That's all for you, Chief. And do we have a question in the end zone?
So, yeah, I'm gonna remember that, Chief.
Wow.
Uh-huh.
Boy, you never hear your friends at all.
Miss Jackie, they were all concerned.
I can only find the wall.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think you did the right one. Close personal working relationships in this group are just hard.
I'm gonna unmute. All right, we're gonna get started here. Welcome, everyone, to our June 12th Portsmouth Town Council meeting. Before we begin, I just want to go through the emergency evacuation procedure. In the event of an emergency, 2 doors on your left, another one at the front of council chambers. We would exit the building, cross Middle Road, and wait further instruction at the school administration building. If we could now please stand for a pledge of allegiance and a moment of silence for our men and women serving in harm's way. Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Okay, little housekeeping. We are live streaming. So those of you that are participating by Zoom, there's an icon for you to raise your hand. If you're calling in on your phone, *9 will indicate you have a question. *6 will allow you to mute and unmute your phone. If you're participating either remotely or in person, please state your name and address for the town clerk. And with that, we will begin with our roll call.
Mr. Gleason?
Here.
Mr. Hamilton?
Here.
Mr. Levesque?
Here.
Dr. Ryan?
Here.
Mr. Aguirre?
Here.
Ms. Copeland?
Here.
Ms. McCabe?
Here.
And, sorry, Ms. Blanc? Here. Mike?
Okay. Thank you. This is our budget hearing. It's a public hearing for the full budget for the town. At this point, I will turn over to Mr. Rayner for a brief recap.
Sure, thank you. Good evening, Mr. President, members of the council, school committee, ladies and gentlemen. The proposed town budget was presented to the council at public meetings held on April 22nd, 23rd, and 24th. A motion to adopt a provisional budget was passed on May 13th. A motion to amend the provisional budget to include the Rhode Island House Finance Committee recommended budget numbers was passed on Monday, June 10th. This House Finance Committee budget, which was passed by the House and passed over to the Senate, increased school revenue from state sources by $92,456. Subsequently, the town contingency was decreased by $58,000, and the local appropriation to the school was decreased by $34,456. The sum of those two numbers being $92,456. Additionally, the budget tonight also incorporates the Rhode Island House recommended tangible tax reimbursement. We are here tonight to review the town council's provisional budget. Following tonight, the final budget is scheduled for adoption at the June 24th council meeting. So up on the screen, we can see the changes to the provisional budget since it was originally approved May 13th. The town contingency, as stated, was decreased $58,000. So it went from $73,000 to $15,000. The school funding formula was increased from $2,855,017 to $2,919,418. So that increase was $64,401. State aid for the high cost of special education was increased from $364,203 to $393,002. So an increase of $28,799. State aid for group home aid was reduced $744. So that went from $273,470 to $272,726. So all in all, total revenue for the school from state sources has been increased from $3,492,690 to $3,585,146. So as I stated, $92,456 increase. As I've stated, the local appropriation was then appropriately reduced to $38,177,838. The tangible tax reimbursement in accordance with the original law was to be $292,999. However, in the budget passed on Friday by the House and passed over to the Senate, we have every indication that this is going to be passed unchanged, reduced the formula, changed the formula for the reimbursement. So that reimbursement is now expected to be $168,869. Interest income, we were very conservative in estimating our interest income. It's running quite high. So we revised that number from $125,000 to $156,674. And then this budget also incorporates the latest tax exemptions. So as originally presented to you in April, tax exemptions totaled $104,341,297. And as of yesterday, they've been reduced. So they now total $103,096,353. So, in the next slide, please. Scroll down. Yeah. So what is the effect of these changes to the provisional budget? The total budget still remains $74,404,959. So you provisionally approved that amount. There's no change. The total levy is $64,232,385. That's the amount that was provisionally approved. There's no change. However, the tax rate on real estate and commercial property has been reduced from $13.18.5 to $13.18.1 per thousand. So there's been a small decrease in the tax rate. So if we start on page 7 of the budget, the actual 7, not the PDF. Okay. Here you find my budget message, which was sent to the council at the end of March. The letter has been annotated to reflect the decision to remove the $58,000, which was added in April to the town contingency fund, which would have been used to pay for a shortfall in the projected school department healthcare premium if needed by the end of FY25. The cumulative effect of the reduced contingency fund, the revised state school aid funding, a reduction in the state tangible tax reimbursement, updated tax exemption information, and the increased revised estimate of budget for interest revenue will result in a residential real estate levy increase of 4.587% and a commercial real estate levy increase of 2.259%. The real estate and commercial tax rate, as I've stated, will drop from 13.185 per thousand to 13.181. The provisional budget approves $74,404,959 in expenditures from the general fund, which is a 3.94% increase over last year. The annual inflation rate for the United States year over year ending in May was 3.3%. As stated, this budget will entail a real estate and commercial property tax rate of 3.181, but the tangible tax rate remains fixed at the in accordance with the motion made last year. This 3.181 per thousand in assessed value for every $1,000 in assessed value compared is over the previous or the current fiscal year rate of 12.782 per 1,000 in assessed value. So therefore, it's about a 40-cent increase over last year's rate. So if we go to page 9. So at the top of page 9, you can see the total property levy of $64,232,386. There is no levy on motor vehicles as that tax has been phased out. The total property levy is determined by adding the real estate, the residential real estate, commercial, and tangible property levies. As I stated, this is a 3.76% increase over last year, and it's about $148,000 below the cap, which is the limit to which the levy can be raised year over year. Total revenues and expenditures are balanced and highlighted at the bottom of the respective sections on this page. For those interested, a detailed breakout of each of these levies is in the budget and is included on pages 15 and 16. So now if we scroll to page 10, we can turn our attention to projected revenues. Starting from the top of the page, we see the projected revenues from, we see all the projected revenues from specific sources. We project revenue from property taxes, state aid, general government operations, public safety operations, the Prudence Island Transfer Station, recreation programs, and rental income. Mr. President, the total revenues anticipated for fiscal year 2025 found at the bottom of page 10 was provisionally approved at $74,404,959. So now, if we scroll to page 25, here we see our projected expenditures listed out. The first section on page 25 breaks out total expenditures for the general government. For our purposes, general government is essentially made up of all the functions and operations located here in Town Hall. That was provisionally approved at $6,705,356. Next is public safety, which includes police, fire, and emergency management operations. This was provisionally approved at $16,582,630. Following public safety is public works, which includes road paving, snow removal, and the Prudence Island Transfer Station. This was provisionally approved at $4,828,136. This is followed on page 26 by Recreation and Parks, which was provisionally approved at $431,071. Civic support is next, just below Recreation and Parks. Total civic support was provisionally approved at $748,931. Following civic support, you can see the total projected debt service for the next fiscal year, which is provisionally approved at $2,480,310. And again, this is broken out in the budget book starting on page 72 for those interested. At the middle of this page, you can see a section labeled Other. The first line item listed here is $134,682 in library aid. It should be noted that this is passed through from the state to the Portsmouth Library. It comes to us first, and we immediately turn it over to the library. Next year's anticipated capital projects and expenditures were provisionally approved at $655,860. The capital improvement plan is listed in the budget and is presented starting on page 70. The other section also includes funds to be distributed to the other post-employment benefit fund, the open space reserve fund, a capital reserve fund, and a contingency account. The vote on Monday reduced the total for other items to $865,542. That's the $58,000 that came out of the town contingency. The school budget is summarized next. Let's turn to page 68, where we can see that budget more clearly. Okay. The school budget is a sum of various parts, which consists of direct town appropriations and several other sources of revenue. The town appropriation was provisionally approved to be $38,212,294. The vote on Monday reduced this to $38,177,838 due to the increased state aid in the Rhode Island House approved budget. We expect federal impact aid of $288,000. We projected state aid to total $3,492,690 based on the governor's proposed budget. The House approved budget increased that aid to $3,585,146, as I highlighted at the beginning. Restricted revenue is projected at $2,230,000. If you go to the next page, we see miscellaneous revenue, which is projected to be $2,648,500, which is a sum of anticipated receipts, profit shares, tuition payments, and Medicaid reimbursement. The total school unrestricted and restricted budget is a sum of these sections, which was provisionally approved at $46,871,484. The result of the vote Monday night revised that total school budget to $46,929,484. So, Mr. President, if we return to page 26, we see that the total town and school budgeted expenditures sum to $74,404,959, which the council has provisionally approved and is equal to projected revenues. The last budget section to discuss are the enterprise funds, which begin on page 83. The first enterprise fund is the Glen Farm Equestrian Center. By contract, the concessionaire shall pay the town an annual base fee plus a percentage of their annual gross receipts. An amount not to exceed the first $5,000 of revenue share generated is credited back to the concessionaire to be invested in repairs, renovation, and long-term maintenance, and this is held in a restricted account. This is monitored through a regular review of the center's financial statements by the Director of Economic Development. The projected revenue was provisionally approved at $19,422. Next is the Headley Street Transfer Station. The Headley Street Transfer Station budget of $1,266,655 was previously approved last year and will be in effect for 18 months, which started January 1st of this year. The Glen Manor House is next. The town earns revenue through a contract with the catering firm contracted to continue the use of the Glen Manor House as a wedding venue. The enterprise fund has therefore been disestablished. It'll be carried until this drops off. Next is the septic loan program. The Portsmouth septic loan program was closed in fiscal year 23, but there's still activity in that account because people are paying off some of these loans. And then lastly is the Arthur Daniel Howell House. Some people call it the Phelps House. Lastly, in accordance with the concessionaire's agreement, the vendors are obligated to remit a $30,000 base fee to the town. Also, as part of the agreement, the base fee will be credited back to the vendor for continued renovations to the building. The council provisionally approved the $30,000 base fee and the $30,000 credit. So, Mr. President, that concludes my brief on the budget. My brief on the budget.
Thank you, Mr. Rayner. Any questions or comments before we open up for public hearing?
I just want to make clear that on Monday night, everything that's been provisionally approved we made the changes. Do we need to make provisional improvements to the budget just to make sure that we cover ourselves to that specifically the local appropriation is now 38,177,838. Do we need to make the changes to the interest income and the tax exemptions? We don't usually do those individually. That's usually just part of the whole budget.
Yeah, I feel like it's redundant because the total is the same and because of the changes that you made on Monday, those are reflected in the budget. I guess the only thing that that wasn't discussed was the change in the interest income.
And then specifically the tax rate itself going down. by
And the tax rate
0.0004
obviously went
cents.
down to 13.181.
Well, I think as a council, just to cover ourselves, that we should, I will make a motion to provisionally approve the investment income revision from 125 to the 156,674 as presented.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 5 to.
And then I would make a motion
Six.
to provisionally approve
Five.
the, 5-0. Provisionally approve the fiscal year 2024-25. Right? Right, yeah, 2025. Real estate tax rate at $13.18.1.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 5 to 0. Okay,
Do we need to update the tax exemptions as well? Yes. Okay. And then the school committee will handle the rest of your adjustments that you need to. Thank you.
thank you, Mr. Hamilton. Okay, so this is a public hearing. If anybody has any comments, questions, now's your opportunity. Come on up.
Tom Grebe, 110 Thayer Drive. I have two areas of the budget I'd like to explore tonight. The first is the pension. When comparing the fiscal year 25 budget to the fiscal year 24 budget, it was found that the fiscal year 24 budget did not fully fund the required pension contribution. It was said that the total correct contribution would be made at the end of this month in order to meet that legal requirement. Looking at the numbers after that meeting, I realized that adding an extra $300,000+ to the pension contribution into the expenditures for fiscal year 24 would drive the fiscal year 24 budget above the 4% levy cap. The original fiscal year 24 budget was tight, and gross appropriations set in the ordinance made the budget only $140,000 from the levy cap. My question is, what adjustments have been made, if any, to keep the fiscal year 24 gross appropriations within the stated ordinance amount? And has there been any subsequent effect on the fiscal year 25 budget?
The answer to your second question is no, the ARP payment is totally accounted for in accordance with the latest Gatsby report. Additionally, as explained during the April meetings, the Gatsby report came out in October after we had already passed the budget, and it was decided then and anticipated then that we would have enough surplus at the end of this fiscal year to make that payment. So there's no adjustment to the total budget. The budget will stay the same. If anything, there'll be a surplus above and beyond what is going to be allocated to that pension payment.
Thank you, Mr. Rayner.
If I may, the pension payment is in addition to what was budgeted.
No, it's just moving numbers within the budget. So we're taking,
That's what that was my original question. What numbers have been moved?
nothing has been moved yet until we get to the final end of the year, so we know where the surpluses are, so we can move them specifically. If DPW has an extra $300,000, we can take the $300,000 out of that line item and move it to the pension line item.
Okay, but what happens if you don't have $300,000?
Well, as we've been reporting every month, we are on track for a significant surplus. And as I've stated repeatedly, over the past few budget meetings, or correction, all through the budget meeting and the last few council meetings, we have frozen discretionary spending, so to ensure that we have that amount of money to pay for the ARPA.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Rand.
The second area I'd like to explore is the recent school bond reimbursement. The fact that the Portsmouth school bond reimbursement will not start until 2026 and take an additional 20 years to be doled out was revealed this budget year. That would have been important information for the voters to have before the election. I cannot find that it was ever provided. It could actually be argued that the information that was provided made it seem like the reimbursement would happen upon the project's completion. Not providing the official information on this bond's non-standard debt service and reimbursement, I believe, was misleading. Anyone who understands the impact the time value of money has on the value of a 23-year financial instrument realizes the magnitude of the potential deception. Voters were further told they should approve this bond in 2021 to get an extra 5% reimbursement. Some school projects were even brought forward in the capital plan to get this. With a coupon interest rate of 5%, with a coupon interest rate of 5% as shown in the budget, paying interest only for 4 years without any reimbursement of principal costs the residents way more than they can get from the 5% incentive. It would have been better for the town to wait until the scheduled upgrades were needed, even if they only received the 35%. By the way, I hope everyone understands that they are actually not getting 40% from the state. That 40% reimbursement comes from the state taxes we all pay. I know these are somewhat complicated financial concepts, but it should be clear to the voters that they were deceived about the reimbursement for this bond. And as a result, fiscal year's 25 budget and taxes are higher than it would otherwise have been. Thank you.
Mr. Evans. Did I hear you use the word deceive and deception?
Actually, you did.
Okay, and whom are you accusing of deception or deceiving the public?
The answer is, I don't know. It could be the school committee,
Only when you
it could be the
accuse
town
somebody of
council, or it
deceptive,
could be the
you ask-
Rhode Island.
All right, one
Please
at a-
let me answer your question.
One at a time.
It could be the school committee, it could be the town council, or it could be Rydam themselves. I don't know when the unusual reimbursement and debt service schedule was put together, but it certainly wasn't provided to the voters, or who put it together, by the way, but it certainly wasn't provided to the voters before they voted. And to me, that's a deception. Every other bond we have is a normal bond. This has variable interest rates. This has interest-only terms. This is a very non-standard bond, and the people should have known that going into the vote.
Again, normally when I accuse or suggest, I do not broadly accuse the entire entity. Was Portsmouth the only one that accessed these bonds? Were there other communities that also brought things forward, or was Portsmouth the only one that actually utilized these bonds?
I have not completed my research, but it appears that Newport has a very similar bond bought 3 months before ours, the
They do
same
not.
sorts of terms.
Disagree, but I'm going to stop you there.
What?
They do not. They have not been reimbursed for their bond in 2021 at all. Their bonds that they're being reimbursed.
This is the
for,
22 bond we're talking about.
Their bond that was done in 2022, I don't care what year it was, they have not been reimbursed any money for that bond period.
Okay,
Their money that they're being reimbursed and similar money that we've been reimbursed in our housing aid was done by previous bonds. So what they're getting reimbursed for now is most likely, and I haven't looked to see specifically,
I haven't
is
either.
their
So,
Sullivan School bond that is also a 20-year bond.
but there are other school that have,
You do not get reimbursed until your project is complete. we only have 5 projects complete within this bond. I think it's 5. The one-way, the gym,
Bathroom.
Melville roof, one set of bathrooms, and a bathrooms at the high school. So 6.
Mr. Hamilton, I want to thank you for assisting me because your knowledge, your historical knowledge in particular is very valuable and your community knowledge. I will also mention that, there is probably no efforts that have so much scrutiny as bond issues. There are a bunch of people called bond counsel who review every single inch of them. I've actually been a little perturbed because they make a lot of money off it. Okay, and I've never really seen it justified because communities almost always pay back or get paid back their bonds. The other thing is kind of funny because coming here tonight, are you still on the water board?
Yes, I am.
Okay, because I was kind of curious about the amount of money we were paying in hydrant payments to the. water
Mr.
board.
President, we're way off topic.
Well, you bring up an issue and I'm just asking you, we pay.
You're asking me something about the issue I
$274,000.
didn't bring up. The issue I brought up is whether or not
But
the
you-
voters
you come
knew
here with
about the bond.
All of your various hats, and I'm asking you about one of your hats.
And it's not on the agenda.
Well, it's-
The hydrant payment is, are you gonna rule me out of order?
No, I believe, is that in the budget? The hydrant payments are in the budget.
Yes, it
And,
is.
and- but
It's in the fire
Mr.
budget.
Green might not be able to speak to that.
Oh, sure he
But-
can.
but,
He
uh,
knows everything.
Well, I'm just saying, I think
This is a-
it's part of the budget, so I guess it is a fair question, but Mr. Green may not be able to answer in his
Okay, and
capacity.
if you wish to take that position, that's fine. I will tell you, I tried to go on and look at the water department's budget. You know, you can't get it online. It says that you have to go and contact them and get their budget either mailed or sent to you or something like that. It would seem to me, and I want to point out a gentleman in the audience who is always very big about this. Why is it that the Portsmouth Water and Fire District doesn't have its budget online as the town does?
The
You
answer
are
is,
also a big
the
advocate
answer
for
is,
that.
I don't know. I will bring it up at the
Good,
June
good.
18th
That's-
meeting
this is
and
reasonable.
see if we can get it on.
Okay, but again, I appreciate your diligence. What I don't appreciate is the fact that you have a tendency to make accusations which you have absolutely no ability to back.
All I can tell you is there is no documentation prior to
But
the
there is
vote
documentation.
that shows how this instrument was going to be produced. And it has a major impact on the value of that instrument and the cost to the residents of Portsmouth. They needed to know if it was going to be a non-standard instrument ahead of time. That's all I'm saying. And I made no accusation as to who did it, but it was done.
I mean, but you use the term deceive and deception, and that's troubling.
It may trouble you, it troubles me as well.
You just don't know really what happened, and you're suggesting your failure to know it is a reason to doubt the sincerity.
What I'm
of the
telling you is
investigation.
I've done some significant research in this, and I can find nowhere that this change in how a bond was put together and to be paid for
Okay,
was
well-
available to the voters ahead of time. That's what I'm saying. I think, especially when it's a major change, it has a major impact on the value of that instrument, that was necessary to do it. And if it wasn't done, I believe logically it's a deception. And I think because it cost the voters more, it was on purpose.
And that's your. you're
That's,
entitled to
I
your
said,
comments.
I prefaced that with I believe.
You're entitled to your comments. I mean, I don't think we're gonna have any answer on that tonight. In the bond discussions from when that was done, but thank you for your comment, Mr. Green.
Mr. President,
Yes.
just to help clarify, well, first off, I appreciate the comments from Mr. Grieb, and I know he does his research, so I don't know what the answer is to give him. I think he deserves the respect of somebody that gets up to share his opinion with the council. regarding the fire hydrants, just to point out that, Portsmouth Water and Fire District does not cover all of Portsmouth. And you may or may not know that part of it is covered by Newport Water directly. Melville Schools is one of the locations, and parts of Redwood Farms, all covered by Newport Water. They also bill us for hydrant rentals, but instead of being $350, and I can't put my finger on the exact number, it's more like $1,000 per rental. So we pay about 3 times the amount to Newport Water for fire hydrants.
Two
And,
things,
and
Mr.
the other thing is, if I may finish,
Yeah,
please.
Yeah, let's.
The other thing is, we are very low tech up at the water department, in my opinion. We don't have the staff, or they don't have the staff, I'm not on the staff, that we have here at Town Hall, being a quasi municipal entity. But I'm sure they'll furnish you a report upon your request, but we will address that matter. But the low tech that we are, I passed a gentleman today on Middle Road. What was he doing? Pickup truck is here. He's wire brushing a fire hydrant. And they go out and they maintain them all summer. They add oil to them. There's actual oil inside those fire hydrants so that when the fireman gets there and they swing that dial to get water out of it, they actually work. So they do put in the maintenance, and I think the town gets a good value for it. So
Mr.
that's
Gleason,
my soapbox.
let me just tell you something. My father and my uncle started the water district. We were counsel to the.
Point of
district.
order.
Well,
President.
you make a statement about, knowing about the water district. My family knew about the water district probably before you moved here. Okay, secondarily.
I would agree.
Mr. Grebe can come up and say anything he wants. But if he says people are deceiving him, or that it was deception, or that somebody did something wrong, that is what I've always jumped on. So it's not a question of me stopping people from making public comment. But if they want to call us cheaters, then I'm going to respond, and you should too. Because it's not just those people, it's us. All right, this is going to be our budget, we approve it, and they're accusing you of deception as much as me. So that's why I jump on, okay?
I don't feel the same way, sorry.
Well, you
Okay.
should.
Next.
You've been very patient. That's all.
Am I on?
You are on.
Thank you. Larry Fitzmaurice, 50 Kristen Court, and speaking for the PCC. I would like to pick up where some of this conversation's already gone and direct people's attention to page 76 or 75, that is, which is where this bond that we're talking about is portrayed. In the budget, it says this bond is for $19.5 million at 5% for 20 years. 19.510 is accurate. The 5% is not, because it's a variable rate. It could have said variable, or it could have spread out the interest rates in the agenda. It's clearly not 20 years, it's 23 years. So, there are errors in this thing and they should be fixed. It should be reasonable to expect the citizens, when they look at these things, to get a fair answer. Also, an accurate one. It also should be a matter of concern for any future people in the bond rating agencies. If they look at our budgets, and I don't know if they do or not, but I suspect if I was in that business, I would, that they get accurate information. So it's not a matter of minor issue. It's a major issue. People need to know, and the people who do the bond rating need to know. Financial people who look at our records should get our accurate answer. So we spent a lot of time on this. We do spreadsheets on these bonds. We've done them on all the bonds that have come forward in recent years. And this one we spent a lot of time on because we couldn't figure it out. And that's because the data was not accurately portrayed.
Can I just interrupt you?
Sure.
Question to the, what is the town of Portsmouth bond rating?
AAA.
AAA. And correct me if I'm wrong, isn't that the best bond issue rating that you can have?
That's correct.
Thank you.
But that doesn't mean it's going to be that way forever. So we have interest, both the town does and the people do, taxpayers certainly, and maintaining that actively. And one of the ways to do that is to have accurate records. So the idea that somehow there's no foul here is not true. And we should be able to get the truth when we look at page 75 and look at this 22 bond. And we didn't. There's a question I have about some of the entries that we have from one of the documents that we managed to get. And that is, and you can see it on page 76, I think. Yep, sorry, I've lost my
Well,
place.
while you're looking, could I ask you mentioned a document you managed to get. How
Yes.
did you manage to get them? Did you
That's-
ask for them?
I don't think I need to answer that question.
Well, you said we managed
I will
to
speak
get.
to it, Mr. Levesque, but I don't think I need to answer that kind of a question from the council.
Well,
Where I get my information from is my business.
But it suggests that you had to ferret it out somewhere, and I'm assuming you got it from the town.
You may assume as
correct.
you wish.
Yeah, it's correct, right? Well, let me ask you another
It's-
question.
it's-
When you represent the PCC, how many people are you actually representing? Do you think I have a right to say that, ask that, seeing as you come up and you say you are the PCC?
Actually, no, you don't.
What's that?
No, you don't.
Huh.
Okay.
Supreme Court says that you don't.
Let's
Well,
just
let's
move
wait a
on.
while.
Okay. In any case, let me go back to where I was trying to get. It is the Rhode Island
The key is that correct? Yes, sir.
Health and Education Building Corporation is the one who apparently did this bond, because we have a document here from that organization. And in this is a spreadsheet which has an entry for a payment made on 5/15 of 23 of $717,290. We don't actually know what that is, but it's listed as interest on this spreadsheet. And I'd like to ask if this appeared in the budget anywhere and what it was for. Does anybody know?
23?
23. May 15th, which is the standard date
Mhm.
in the payment of these interest and principal payments.
I think we might have an answer from the crowd.
Yes, sir.
I happen to know this answer. So, the bonds were issued at above par and that money was capitalized and used to pay the interest. So it did not go through the budget.
I'm sorry, I missed something.
So the bonds were issued at more than par value. It was capitalized and used to pay for the first year's interest.
Okay, so you're bringing it in from the overpayment on the
Yes.
value of the bonds.
Yes.
Okay. And did that appear in our budget anywhere? Did that appear in our budget?
No,
Is
As
that-
as he just stated, that was not part of the budget. That was capitalized money. Because the bond was issued over par, but I believe, and I don't have it in front of me, but I believe it's all laid out in the debt service publication that is published on the web every year.
It is.
Okay, the town received the above par payments, right? I
don't
mean,
know What your point is, Mr. Fitzmaurice?
Well, I'm trying to find out why it is that this, I can't find this money, this revenue anywhere in our budget. So if the answer is we don't know, then I'll take that, I
Historically,
guess.
Mr. Fitzmaurice, when you get the bond, you sometimes get the money in preparation of paying out. The money doesn't just sit in somebody's wallet, it gets put in the bank, it garners interest. Now, what will happen with that interest is, one, it may be used to pay back some of the obligation on the bond. If there is excess, and I think we actually have a number here that shows that if there is excess, we actually, that can sometimes be turned back over to the town and is shown as interest income for the town. But usually it's an entirely separate unit. And again, you get the money, and before you're spending it out, you actually obtain some interest, and sometimes that's maintained with the bond issue, and sometimes it is expended for interest on that bond issue.
Additionally, this is a budget of the general fund. That was not a general fund expenditure. And it is laid out in the debt service book. Now, the debt service book does list 5%, and they're correct. It does go down in a few years. We'll make that correct annotation to the budget. But as I stated 2 years ago, this information put in the budget at your request was informative. And I stated then that all we're doing is repeating what is already on the web. So we're creating something that is already published in a debt service book that is on the web.
And Mr. Fitzmaurice, if you don't mind me just jumping in real quick. August 10th, 2021, when there was presentation on the bond, specifically the repayments on the bond show starting in 2022, principal only, excuse me, interest only for the first couple of years and being paid through 2044.
Okay,
So if you're looking for that specific information, it is available. And there was no deception to the taxpayers if they wanted to dig in to see exactly where the money's going and where it's coming from.
well, I would point out that this $717,000 doesn't appear anywhere that I can find.
Because that happened after the bonds were issued, because they were issued in a favorable way to the town.
But it's still revenue to the town, right? You sold something and you got paid more than you'd hoped for. But you still got the revenue. Now, maybe I'm being too simplistic about this, but I don't think so. Now, if there's an answer that can be had, then fine. If there isn't, I'll take that as it is and move on. But we should be able to look at these things and figure them out. We shouldn't have to go down to New York and get a bond expert to answer these questions. Should be easy to understand, and the people that read this thing, the budget, by the way, should be able to read it and understand it. And that's an issue that we've made a case of before the council before. And as Mr. Rayner has pointed out accurately, there's been a number of changes to the budget down through the years that make it easier to read. I've attempted to read other people's budgets and I like ours a lot better. So I will acknowledge that there's been improvements. I'd like to talk to page 87, which is a special revenue funds with deficits. One of those things we asked to be shown in the budget. It is in the budget and well shown. Last year, we talked to council about the fact that some of these funds had deficits in them. In other words, somebody was spending money we didn't have, at least on one line item, right? And my understanding of how these things work is that the special revenue funds are all separate, specified monies received by the town for a specialized purpose and can't be commingled with other funds. And so what I did is I combined two of the reporting periods and from the budget. And I must say at the beginning, the comparison I'm going to give you is from the FY23 actual numbers and the December 31st, 2023 numbers. So that's roughly 6 months. So if not exactly 6 months. So it's not a full year. So I want to acknowledge that that's not a full year. But what we're looking at last year, we had 5 of these funds that were in deficit. And that deficit added up to about $109,000. At December 31st of last year, there were 10 of these funds in deficit. And that looks like a problem to me. It looked like a problem when there's a deficit before. I thought we had an understanding we were not going to deficit spend in these areas. And so I just point that out. I think that I don't need a specific answer as to why the money is that way, but I will reiterate the belief that these things should not be in deficit. And I've not
If I
ever
may,
heard,
Mr.
sir.
Morris, many of these funds are very active accounts. This is an unaudited number at a specific point in time. We stated that last year as well. There's monies that get spent out of here that are due in due froms. Some of these, for instance, the Rhode Island 365 RI grant, right? These are reimbursable funds. You have to expend the funds, show the invoice, and then it gets reimbursed. Or there's due in, due outs. You'll get a taser. You got to pay for the taser or whatever. And then you show that this has been done, and then you get the money back in. None of these funds are commingled. They all have their own line item, and they're tracked very meticulously by finance. To say that they should never be in deficit is a noble goal, but that's not the way accounting works.
Thank you, Mr. Rayner. I believe you explained that one to us last year as well, that, you know, these are sometimes it's a reimbursement and we just haven't been reimbursed yet. And I do believe that the accounting is on par and we don't run deficits in the special revenue funds. So thank you.
So I will look at the audit and see if I can figure it out from there. Thank you for the explanation. And I think it's news to me, and it shouldn't have been, but that some of these things are reimbursable, should have figured that out. But at any rate, they're not. Let me speak in general to the overall budget and how we're operating our budget this year and in past years as well. But this year, we seem to be very close to the limits of what we can tax. Mr. Rayner said it's about 148,000 below the cap, and my calculations is 151, so I won't quibble with it. We're in the same ballpark. Either way, that's very close to the cap. And that means that we are spending the maximum amount of tax money, or we're taxing at the maximum amount of rate we can. If we stub our toe or if the sparrow falls outside, we're going to be in deficit and over the cap. So obviously we're running some pretty good size surpluses, but our budget is premised upon a fundamental belief that the housing business is going to provide enough new taxable properties in the coming year that will be okay. 31% thereabouts, my figures, of the budget increase, tax increase for the residential property taxes is coming from this revenue source. And we all know that if we hit a downside in the housing business, then housing starts in this town have a tendency to go to near zero. So we're not talking about something that's theoretical here. But I've said this before, and I think it's important enough to repeat that the council should realize the risks they're taking in these when we go right up to the cap and we're spending to the maximum amount of property taxes we can take. That some days it's going to go wrong on us one of these days, and we're going to be in real serious trouble. And because we have most of our revenues caught up, I mean, our obligations are caught up in contracts with our labor, we don't really have a lot of room to maneuver. And I acknowledge the fact that we're probably going to run a good size surplus. The last surplus was $1 million. So I understand that. But I think that, and I also understand from Mr. Rayner's comments that the last year or the current year estimates on housing starts in the town of Portsmouth was very good. So I'm not criticizing the review or the research. I'm just saying this is not, we're just right up against the edge on this thing. And if we get over it and we make a mistake or we get surprised by something, then the taxpayer is going to be expected to pay the bill. as always, and it was going to be a big one. So understand that you need to be fast on your feet if things start to go bad in the housing business in town of Portsmouth. So I know that's theoretical, but I think it's easy to come to fruition if we're not careful.
Hey, can I ask you a question? Because I want to make
Yes.
sure I understood specifically what you just stated. You're stating that 31% of the increase in the real estate property tax, we are anticipating coming off of new housing starts?
Yes. Or coming on to the tax rolls, not starts really.
No.
Don't agree? Understand? And you can get back to me some other day and make the argument.
Thank you.
Yeah.
But we're not, when we tax a new house, it comes onto onto the rolls. We're taxing the entire value of the house. We're not doing a 3.1% or 3.31% increase on the value. We're taxing the whole house. Because it's new, right? You understand that, right? So that in terms of what we tax that individual house, it goes up a lot, means a lot in that.
How is that different than how we tax an existing house?
Would you repeat that, please?
How is that different than how we tax an existing house?
No,
we-
it's different because it's new monies. So,
Well, but that's not, okay.
but it's,
okay. I mean, the thing is, yes, when a new piece of property comes on, you would probably be one of the first people up here, Mr. Fitzpatrick, if we didn't send them a tax bill. Okay, and my recollection was that it's basically December 31st, if it comes on, gets its occupancy permit, we tax it. The fact is that Portsmouth has always benefited from a burgeoning development. We have actually at times tried everything we could to put the brakes on it. Okay, but in terms of how much that adds, you gotta understand, this is $1 billion. The property in this town, I mean, the fact is that yes, new housing, income supports some things, but it's not that significant. As a matter of fact, the reason the 4% is in there is not really because it's a magic number. It's not a good number at all. It was designed to prevent communities like Portsmouth that had burgeoning real estate development from being able to just spend and not worry about a property tax cap. So they made it upon the levy because Portsmouth could then have a lot more money for its schools if we were able to do it on a property tax as opposed to a levy. I went to a lot of council meetings with cap as opposed to levy. Trust me on this one.
Actually, I was on the group that got what is the tax cap law in place. So I have a fair understanding of how that was done.
I
So,
cannot hear you, Mr. Fitzmaurice.
at the time I was on the group, with the group, there were taxpayer groups, it was put together to get what turned out to be the tax cap law passed under Pavel Weed's leadership a number of years ago. And that tax cap law is, I understand how it was, written because we wrote it.
Was that 60-40? Was that Governor DePreet 60-40? Because they never did the 60-40 as Councilman Hamilton could do. They changed it thereafter to do on the levy because we were able to significantly improve our school systems where places in the inner city were not.
Well, let me be more precise. I was on the group that had the current tax cap law passed. We were trying to get a constitutional amendment. We failed on that, but we were able to get it passed out of the Senate. And then the House of Representatives approved it, of course. So it's been state law for a while, and we monitored it over that time, over a long time, to make sure that it didn't get changed along the way that didn't work out against our interests. So I do understand the emphasis behind that. It was from RIPEC. the Rhode Island Public Expenditure Council and from the Rhode Island Statewide Coalition were the two groups who put together that thing. So I do understand how it worked. That's it for me.
Let me ask you questions. I just want to know where you're getting, and I'm gonna ask Matt to chat real quick too, but where are you getting that 31% number from? Because
Okay, what I did is I took
I'm looking at the certified tax rolls
yeah,
anticipated this year versus what was last year.
Yep.
And you're looking at
what I did is.
4,965,147,299 versus 4,913,644,276. To me is a 1% differential.
I didn't follow your numbers, so I'm sorry.
I'm going off of the gross total assessed values, which is the same numbers you.
I use the net assessed values, not the gross.
Okay,
But in any rate,
but
there's,
either way, it's 1% differential, not 31%. So we're not, and that gross property tax is not just solely on new housing starts, it's also on people who put in additions. And
Understand.
everything. So I agree with you that we need to be concerned about new housing starts because the Narragansett Bay Club is almost built out. So all those houses that are slowly coming on the rolls won't be happening in 2 years. And we're slowly building out the town. But
well, I'm sure
I
that
think
you,
that's a problem further on down the road, not next year.
my main concern, and we can get lost in the numbers, but
Sure.
my main concern, and I know you remember, that there were years in which we built, we dropped from 75 homes being built in Portsmouth down to around 5. That actually happened. And it's in my judgment, we're pushing so close to the tax cap that we don't have a lot of room to maneuver if that happens. And that's the main point that I wanted to make. And the rest of it is, we can discuss the numbers later, and I can't find them for the moment, but it was about $780,000 is what I calculated against. So, thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Fitzmaurice. I think Matt has some information. Page 16,
Matt Holfman, tax assessor.
just into the, microphone.
Typically, what's budgeted and anticipated is somewhere, it's less than 1%, and typically it's between 0.5 and 0.75% you attribute to new construction growth.
I
You
got
said
one.
less than 1.
I got one. So,
You were rounding up.
sorry,
It's
I'll
okay.
stop that.
All right. Well, this is a public hearing. Any further comments, questions?
Motion to close the public hearing?
That-
I move
Unless
that
there's
we
anything
close
online.
the public hearing?
We have a motion and a second. Is there anything online? No?
I don't have it up. Probably there's no questions from the.
Okay. So I have a motion and a second to close the public hearing. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 5-0.
Mr. President, is there a motion necessarily to pass the budget as?
No,
No.
that's on the 24th.
Yeah, next
So
meeting.
no, we just need a motion to adjourn.
I will move to adjourn.
Second.
All those in
Sorry.
favor?
I feel like it's Monday night again. I'm sorry.
Man,
Thank you.
seats, the seats like not even, man. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? I know. Thank you all.
Only took one day, Mark. you know?